promises to pay bearer on demand. Okay? So the security and the maturity both must be beyond doubt. And then there's no difference. And I take issue with that. This is unfortunately not true. Mises made a mistake. Why? Because there is one exception. I mean, he may be right on 99 counts, but on one count he fails. What's that exception? Where the promise to pay gold coin cannot replace the gold coin itself, no matter what you do. Well, this is something we have discussed several times already here.
Controlling the rate of interest.
Yeah. The bondholders, the marginal bondholder will not take a promise. The marginal bondholder acts. Why? Because the rate of interest has been pushed below his time preference rate. So he fights back. In protest, he sells his bond. Now, you come and offer him a promise to pay gold. Will he take it? Well, he will be a fool to take it, because he has already a promise in his hand, the gold bond, which pays interest at a positive rate. Maybe very small, but still it's a positive rate. Now you offer him a gold certificate which pays zero interest. So they are both future goods, but which is better, which is worse? The gold certificate is worse because it pays zero interest. This pays very little interest, admitted, but at least it's still a positive interest. So the marginal bondholder will say, thank you, but no thank you, because he is not going to make the exchange. He would be jumping from the frying pan into the fire if he did. He's not a fool. He's not a fool. So there it is. That example proves that the gold coin cannot be always replaced by a promise to pay the gold coin. And because of that, the marginal bondholder is going to insist on gold coin, and that is the significance of gold coin. And David Ricardo, 100 years before Mises, was also wrong, because he advocated what came to be known as the bullion, or the gold bullion standard. And the gold bullion standard is a very bad construction. Why? Because the minimum amount of gold which you could withdraw is 400 ounces. It's a 400-ounce gold bar. Well, the marginal bondholder cannot do his arbitrage between the bond market and the gold market if the minimum amount he can trade is 400 ounces. He needs the gold coin, which is in the order of $10, $20, maybe $100 at the very most. $100 gold coin in 1920 was roughly an ounce. No, the $20, the $100 franc coin in the Latin American Union was roughly comparable. So that's about an ounce. 100 franc gold coin and a $20 gold piece. So that's what the marginal bondholder needs, and that's what he insists upon. So there it is. Now, I come to a very, very important point, and then we can have a break after. The greatest significance of the real bill doctrine is not very widely known. In fact, there was only one economist in the whole world. There's just one economist. And I'm very happy that we are in München today, and I can pay homage to this great man because he was a German. He was not a Bavarian, but still he was a German. The name is Heinrich Rittershausen. And Heinrich Rittershausen observed that the totality of real bill circulation, that's the outstanding real bills, which have not matured yet, but they are out there and they circulate through endorsement, and now I'm referring to this pie chart here, okay? So take the totality of these and think of it as a pie, a round pie, okay? And ask the question, what portion of this pie, or how is this pie cut up and distributed? That's the question. And then you will see that there are these so-called primary producers, such as farms and mines. There might be more, but for the sake of simplicity, I stop and just say these two. Those are the two small slices of the pie. The payments to farmers and the payments to the mines, okay? But the vast majority of the real bills represent something which I call, and I think Rittershausen called, the wage fund. Now I have to explain this because this is very, very crucial, very, very crucial. Now think of the problem which the producer faces. He is producing a very useful merchandise which is in very, very high demand. Very high demand. Okay? And there's no question that he will be able to sell it. But in order to produce it, it would take, say, 3 months to produce this. And during these 3 months, he will be facing a wage bill. He will have to come up with money to pay wages. He has to meet his payroll every week, and there are 13 weeks in 3 months. So 13 times this producer will have to advance money to pay his laborers who produce this. Without laborers, this will never come into existence. Where is he going to get that money to meet his payroll? Should he go to the bank and haggle with the bank? The bank may be reluctant. The fact is that under the real bills doctrine, the producer faces no problem whatsoever, because he just writes the bill, puts it into circulation, and bingo, the wage fund is there. He can pay his workers. See? 13 times in a quarter, 13 times in 3 months' time. There is no question the wages will be paid on time, without fail. But now, what happened? In 1913, the bill market was closed because of the war in Europe. And they financed production through war credits and so on. So the problem did not show up. And it didn't even show up in 1918 after the hostilities ceased. Germany was defeated, the Entente powers were victorious, and they had to decide what to do with the bill market. And they made, I might add inadvertently, this was not a conscious mistake. It was a mistake, but inadvertent mistake. They decided, the Entente, the victorious Entente powers, decided in their wisdom that they will not allow the bill market to return. They did not allow international circulation of real bills, which was the norm before the war. The huge volume of world trade, all of which was financed through real bill circulation. And this was just ruled out. Ruled out for a political reason. The Entente powers were afraid of German industrial competition. And they would have loved to continue the blockade. You know, a large part of the victory of the Entente powers is due to their blockade. They could actually stifle Germany because of the blockade. Germany did not have access to such things as oil and minerals and this and that and that. Food also. I just read the statistics that 100,000 German people died of starvation during World War I because of the blockade by the Entente powers. Now, whether it's true or not, or the figure is higher, I don't know, but there was that too. And the Entente would have been very happy to continue the blockade, controlling what goods entered into Germany and what goods left Germany. But of course, this is something that wouldn't work in peacetime. Blockade is definitely a war measure, so they couldn't do that. And therefore, they tried to move from multilateral trade to bilateral trade. And that meant move away from real bill financing of world trade to a bilateral agreement between two governments, the importing and exporting governments, to finance that trade. Forgetting that they need far more gold to carry on bilateral trade than multilateral. Because the clearing system of the bill market is very, very efficient for multilateral trade. But for bilateral trade, each country has to have a large gold reserve to settle occasional imbalances of trade. Well, I realize that I'm 15 minutes past the mark, and therefore we could have break now, but I want to continue after the break, and then we'll have questions, okay? Yeah,
we'll be back in 15 minutes. Thanks, Professor. Okay, welcome back. So, Professor is just going to continue for a bit, and then we'll move on to comments and questions. Professor?
Okay. So the idea is that the real bill doctrine has a very important consequence, namely that when producers produce for the market, which means they don't produce for order, but they are producing for the market, then they have to finance their wage bill, the payroll. And this is a problem which finds an easy solution under the real bills doctrine. But if you eliminate real bills, as the victorious Entente powers did in 1918, they did not allow, on purpose, they did not allow real bills to return, then there is a problem. There is no way to pay the wages of those laborers whose product will reach the market during the next 3 months. But wages have to be paid weekly. The laborer has to eat, he has to buy food for his family and meet other obligations. So if the employer cannot finance the wage bill, he will lay off labor. And that's what actually happened. And this is the insight of Heinrich Rittershausen, which he was the only man who did see the problem already in the 1920s, during the Roaring Twenties. He did not, he anticipated a very great problem, the unemployment, horrible unemployment, sweeping through Europe and the world. And that's exactly what happened. And why did it happen? Ladies and gentlemen, because the wage fund was destroyed, and it was destroyed by the victorious Entente powers, inadvertently, as I say, because they didn't know what they were doing. They did it in secret. There was no open discussion about it. They just decided that if we cannot have a blockade against Germany, then we'll just pull the multilateral financing out of use and replace it with bilateral. With this ploy, we try to control German imports and exports. That was the motivation. But they were completely forgetful that in doing this they have actually destroyed the wage fund. There was no way to finance the wage bill. So a large part of the productive plan in the world was laid idle for reasons that the traditional way of financing the wage bill, the payroll, paying laborers, was destroyed. And that's what happened, and this is, I'm at a complete loss to understand how the world could ignore the tremendous insight of one economist, Heinrich Rittershausen, because there was no response. Mises himself does not mention him. He should have actually given support to Rittershausen, because that is what the governments did in destroying the wage fund and bringing it. That was a very large part of the cause of the Great Depression. Now, I just finish with one thought. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in much the same position today. the wage fund is still absent because there are no real bills circulating. And there is not even talk about considering reintroduction of the real bills, which could create or recreate the wage fund. And remember, in the 19th century there was no such a thing as structural unemployment. This word was completely missing. It just wouldn't have made sense to anybody living in the 19th century. All of a sudden, in the 20th century, we keep talking about structural unemployment. Well, how come? Where did this structural unemployment come from? Well, it came from the destruction of the wage fund. Think about it, and you will see the connection. And unless the world wakes up and sees the problem in this light, as we discuss it here, and decides to return to real bill financing, the unemployment which is coming up will be even worse than that in the 1930s. So I sign up.
Excellent. So, any questions or comments?
I don't quite understand how wages are provided for through real bills.
Well, the producer delivers the goods to the wholesaler, or take the wholesaler delivers the goods to the retailer. Then the producer bills the wholesaler. Bill is a verb in the English language. It means you write a note that you owe me that much, payable on such and such a day. So the face value, maturity date, and a complete description of what he has delivered. Okay, that's the bill. Now, the wholesaler signs across the face of the bill, he writes, I accept. With this, he symbolizes that he takes responsibility for paying this, attaches his signature, and gives it back to the producer. Now, the producer, when he introduces, well, he has to replenish his inventory of factors of production. So we can use this bill in payment, and whoever accepts this bill will sign the back. Okay. Now, it's not sorted out what part of this face value of that bill goes for the wages, for buying supplies, and so on, because in paying for supplies, so much goes for wages. And in fact, if you take it as a whole, you will find that the lion's share of the face value of the real bill will go for paying wages. Because wages are all there. Whether you produce or you ship it or you warehouse it or whatever you do, there are human beings. Well, sure, there's machinery and automation and all that, but ultimately it's human beings who pull the levers of the machines. Okay? And therefore the wage bill is a very large part. Now, please, don't say that don't believe for a moment that I have actually calculated this. This is just a rule of thumb. The numbers could be very different. All I'm saying is that a very large part of the bill market represents the wage fund.
This is very clear. Now, I was just wondering the mechanism, right? You have a wholesaler whose a large portion of his structure of production, like what he has, his costs consist of wages. but how does he pay his employees?
No,
What is the-
well, the producer, most of the wages are paid by the producer. So the producer bills the wholesaler. The wholesaler returns the bill, I accept, and so on, returns it to the producer. And the producer can use that bill to buy supplies, but also to pay wages.
How?
Well, very simply, through the banks.
Okay.
Okay? The bank will discount his bill. So he says, okay, next Friday or Thursday I have to pay so much out in the form of wages. So the bank will then take this bill and against this bill will advance the coins or paper money or what have you to pay the wages. That's the mechanism. The banks do come in because obviously the bill, the face value is too large. But the banks have the job to break up the bill and issue standard denomination banknotes, and that's how the wages are paid.
And so effectively, a portion, once the bill matures, a portion of this would be transferred to the bank.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Instead of bank, you can say discount house.
Pardon me?
Instead of bank, you can say discount
Oh,
house.
this, okay, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to do that.
The reason we insist on the alternative is because if the world's banking system collapses, wage payments will not stop because there will be other businesses taking over that function of the bank, namely the discount house. The discount house makes it its business to take the real bill and discount it before the maturity date. So the discount house will have the gold coin or silver coin, what have you, which will be used for wage payment.
I mean, we do agree that the ultimate money is gold. Actually, gold is the only money. Everything else is debt. So you're suggesting, or you want banks or discount houses to issue bank notes saying what? What does it say? A weight of gold? Or what does it stand? You know, they take discount the real bills and they give out, well, what do you call this money? Are these banknotes, is this money in your terms? And what does it say on the banknotes? I owe you what?
Well, you have to specify what scenario you have in mind. Do you have a normal scenario where banks are operational and they offer their services and no question about their solvency and so on? Or you are talking about a crisis situation?
I talk about the best figurative world.
Which one?
The what?
I call it the figurative world. I mean, the world, how you...
What figurative world?
Your best scenario, how should it be? If you had to design a monetary order, or if we had, like, say, free banking, and you make a prognosis, what would be the outcome? You say, no, we need a wage fund, and it needs to be funded with real bills. And then this colleague asked, well, but are the workers paid with real bills? You say, no, they are paid with banknotes. How do the banknotes come into play? You say the real bills are discounted by a discount house or by a bank, and in return you get banknotes. Now my question is, what does it say on the banknotes? I owe you what? What are they denominated in? What's the account?
That's a technical question, and that's a very interesting question, I admit, but that's not our problem here. As soon as you agree that there is a wage fund, and it's a part of the total volume of real bill circulation, then the problem is solved. Now there is a technical problem, how to get the hand-to-hand money into to the laborers, to the wage earners. That's a technical problem. And as I say, I could give you a separate lecture on that, but I don't think it's necessary. Well, all right.
Answer it very quickly.
Okay.
When the bank accepts the bill, all it is doing is chopping it up into smaller denominations and pushing it out again. It's still a real bill, except it has Bank of England on it.
And also, it's highly.
Banknotes, what are these? What are
A banknote is a real bill. Okay, it expires into cash gold. Old Bank of England notes used to bear interest. You know,
so you suggest that the worker will accept not a banknote but a paper on which it says it expires in so and so much days, and if you don't hand it to the
No, I'm not saying the worker would accept that, but that is what the bank did.
No. Actually, Sandy got the point that the bank does, it substitutes its own credit, which has high recognition value, as opposed to a real bill, which could have a low recognition. But the real bill is the real bill. The banknote has no other merit than breaking up a very large real bill with a low name recognition to a more manageable standard denomination banknote and with a high recognition, name recognition.
So the workers.
I think I see the question has a really simple answer. There's a discount rate, which is what induces people who have gold coins to want to buy the real bills. So you're the company, you just got this real bill, you pay your workers, you go to the discount house, you can break it down or whatever. At some point, there's a market for somebody like me who says, I have some gold coin, I would prefer to own a real bill because I can buy 100 ounces worth of gold for 99.1 ounces, and I'll get my 100 ounces next month. Here's the 100 ounces of gold. Now you have 100 ounces of gold as a producer to pay, or you can break it up into silver change if you want, to dole out to the actual wage fund. There's a very, very large and deep and robust market in this. Somebody's actually putting forth the gold because they're enticed by the discount rate. The real bill is an earning asset, the gold coin is a dry asset. Does that make sense?
So again, what is the worker paid with?
Gold or silver.
Does he get coins? Gold.
Yes.
Okay, no, that's it.
Can I add something to this? Small denomination banknotes did not exist. Small denomination, 1, 2, 5, 10, only large ones.
Yes, okay.
And the small denomination money was in the form of coin.
Yes.
And in fact, one of the slips down the slippery road was putting out small denomination paper notes. Because then people started to use this as if it was money. The large payments, 100,000 or something for a house or a big factory, everybody knew what was going on, those people at that financial level. So there's no need for small denomination banknotes, but there is a need to break up those big bills of unique values into units.
Yeah.
But they're automatically broken up into gold and silver units. So there's no need for small denomination banknotes. So the worker will not have to be paid in banknotes, should be paid in small coin.
Okay, so somebody buys with real money, with gold, the real bills?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he's interested in what you wouldn't call interest, but the discount.
The discount, yes.
It's not interest, it's not a matter of calling it. It's quite different. Discount rate is one thing, the rate of it is another.
That's for the discount rate. That's why the gold owner wants to buy the
Yes.
bills, because he's interested
It's
in the profit of
the earning asset.
It's an earning
The
asset.
real bill is an earning asset, the next best thing to gold itself, which is a non-earning asset. But the real bill is an earning asset, and it's maturing into gold in no more than 91 days.
Now this goes beyond this particular course. The professor does a whole course on real bills. One of the interesting things that goes on is that retail merchants whose primary product is going out of season will be selling down their inventory and buying up real bills to make money in the off-season. So let's say you sell heating oil, you come in around the end of March now, you really don't want to have inventory of heating oil going into April. So you're buying up a stock of real bills, you're putting your company's gold capital into the real bill market to earn a return while you basically have to shut down and you can't really sell heating oil for the next 6 months or so. And then obviously in the fall, it's the companies that produce summer merchandise, pool equipment, and gardening supplies and whatever, that are putting their money into the real bills. And so it's really economy-wide. There's always somebody who says, I would prefer to give up my gold coin in exchange for a little bit more gold later, because it has nothing to do with the gold at the moment. There's always somebody in that position. Lots of somebodies.
And, you see, the problem what you are talking about is an entirely different topic, which has nothing to do with our main interest here. But it's an important topic, and we deal with it in our structured courses. It comes up under the heading, how did banknotes originate? And that fable, which most of the textbooks accept, that there was fraud involved. Goldsmith found that he could issue far more warehouse receipts than he had gold in hand, and then the whole world fell for it because the whole world was populated with stupid people. I mean, that's the standard explanation. We have a far superior explanation, but this is not the time to discuss it. You have to come back to our course where we are going to the real, and I think the course will be called The Real Bill Doctrine of Adam Smith, and we incorporate this theory of how the banknote came into being without bringing fraud into it. Okay.
Any more questions? Alessandro?
Before the break, you were talking about the lowering interest rate scenario where the investment basically slowed down. But what about if the investors funding with variable loans that basically stay paid as interest as the interest rate is at that very moment? What about the investors?
So basically, when you were talking about the destruction of capital from falling interest rates, what happens if a business pays the floating interest rate, so it doesn't pay the interest rate that it was contracted at, but the open market rate?
Well, is it not our understanding that under the gold standard interest rate is pretty stable? That's our understanding. So floating rate has no merit under the gold standard because there is no floating. It's stable, period. No benefit from some...
Let me just jump in if I may. I wrote a short piece about this. In the regime of paper, when interest rates are falling, the company has two choices, which is either mismatch its duration or finance at a high rate and then lose as the rate falls. And so the chief financial officer has a dilemma, and either way he picks, he loses. If he has a 20-year project and finances it with a 20-year bond, he will be destroyed as the interest rate is cut and cut and cut and cut and cut again, which is what the professor's talking about. His alternative is to float it, in the 1 month market. So every time the rate is coming down, he can keep refinancing. And that's good as far as it goes, but then that gets to the problem of duration mismatch. He has a 20-year asset and a 1 month liability against it, and he has to roll it 20 times 12, which is 240 times. Sooner or later, he will find that he can't roll it when the credit market sees up, and that's how I believe Nortel Networks went bankrupt.
I think it's quite rare for a company to sort of have a floating rate. I mean, you issue a bond, you issue your coupon is fixed, and then it has a market price.
Yeah, but
There are the number of companies that say we're going to float a bond where the coupon varies with the rate of interest. That's quite nil, basically.
Well, if even I can get only a 20-year bond with fixed rate, okay, what if I buy an interest rate swap, so I sell my fixed rate and I buy the variable rate and I can roll the swap or stuff like that.
You can protect yourself if you think interest rates are going to fall, but this is all sort of peripheral. I mean, it's because we're in a fiat system that you can have the derivative on interest rates and whatnot. You can't do that under a gold standard, though.
Yeah, but in that book,
Can I address this? If you get a mortgage on a house, you have a choice, and it's the same kind of thing. You can take a 20-year or 15-year mortgage at a certain interest rate, or you can take a floating rate, but that's inevitably higher, because somebody else is assuming that risk for you, so you pay them. If you want to finance your house on a 5-year term, it's going to be much higher than if you go for a 20-year term. You are paying, somebody has to pay. So you can't just, I'm going to choose a floating rate at no cost. There is a cost. You understand what I'm saying?
okay, yeah, I understand.
So, because what Keith was saying, that you roll it over, okay, then you don't roll it over because you took 20, somebody else is rolling it over. The bank that gave you that term. But the fact that there is a mismatch does exist. It doesn't go away, it's just shuffled up to somebody else.
Yeah.
Any more questions? François.
Yes, Professor, I have a historical question. If a large part of the world trade was financed through real bills before World War I, how could this market be closed so easily without any protest? I don't understand, because if I listen to you, it's very easy to just say the bill market was closed, like you switch off a light. But there were huge interest at that time on this market. Many people working, discounting bills. How did it happen exactly? Did it happen all of a sudden or little by little?
It was simply blocked. The after hostilities stopped, the world, I mean, if there was no interference from the Entente powers, then real bill circulation would have risen spontaneously, because people have to eat, people have to buy clothes, shoes, fuel in winter, and therefore they will buy these. And to finance this movement of the goods to the consumer is obviously the real bill financing. So that would have come naturally, that would have come spontaneously. But you see, the armies were still there was occupation of countries and so on, and therefore the movement of goods could be controlled. And the way they controlled it, and this was done in secret, is they had an understanding that real bills are not allowed. What this means, and now this is my answer to your question, they shifted from multilateral trade to where?
Bilateral.
Bilateral trade. You see, multilateral trade is like monetary circulation. Bilateral trade is like barter. You have something in surplus and have a deficit of something else, and I have a matching thing. I have a surplus what you need, and vice versa. So we swap. No money is necessary, no gold, you see. And this is exactly what happens. It's a little exaggeration that the world was pushed back to barter. It's a little exaggeration because money was still there, but the quality of money wasn't there because it was no longer gold. The bilateral trade was really financed by paper money, which had no intrinsic value.